This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've sent us a massive stack of sources comparing some of the world's great civilizations. We're talking Europe, China, the Islamic world.
And they all circle around one really profound question.
Right. Does a civilization's fate, its entire intellectual destiny, really just rest on how difficult life is?
That is the core tension here. We're looking at environmental stability and how its absence or presence affects the growth of what we call external rationality.
So things like science, law, philosophy.
Exactly, the systems you build to understand and control the world.
So our mission today is first, to see if there's a universal rule here, a kind of deep civilizational law.
And then second, to tackle the ultimate puzzle, Japan. Because based on the sources, Japan should have followed one path.
The path of stability and, well, stagnation. But it absolutely did not.
And the universal law that seems to emerge from all this it's really counterintuitive. It's basically that the harsher the life, the stronger the reason.
I mean, that's a provocative idea.
It is. The thesis is that if necessity doesn't force you to innovate, if your life is comfortable enough, you just won't develop those sophisticated intellectual tools. You don't need to.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Section 1, this global rule. Let's start with Europe, which is really the poster child for the harsh life theory. I love how the sources call it a civilization of geographical stinginess.
It really was. I mean, think about it. After the Roman collapse, you're trying to build a society on what? Poor, glacially scraped soil.
Right. And a cold climate, not a lot of sunlight, which means short growing seasons.
Brutal winters. And the crops they had, wheat, oats, rye, were hard to irrigate and often failed.
So in that context, reason isn't some luxury for scholars in a library.
No, it's a survival weapon. When prayer alone can't guarantee your harvest is going to come in, you have to develop practical external systems.
You're forced to invent.
You are. This is where you see things like the heavy plow taking off just so they can turn that dense, clay-heavy soil in northern Europe.
And it's where you see this obsession with harnessing energy, right? Water mills, windmills.
Because human and animal labor just wasn't enough. They had to constantly find new ways to keep society warm and fed.
So Europe was, in a way, perpetually in need of repair.
That's a perfect way to put it. It was a civilization that couldn't survive without constantly fixing its environment through invention and fixing its internal systems through, political and philosophical reform.
And that nonstop need for an overhaul that creates the urgency.
That's the intellectual pressure cooker that eventually gives birth to the scientific revolution.
Okay, so now let's pivot. Let's look at the societies of China and the Islamic world. If Europe was that faulty used car that's always in the shop,
then these were the automated driving societies.
the self-driving car.
Exactly. Stability was engineered into the system from the very beginning. You had massive river civilizations, the Yellow River, the Nile, the Tigris.
So guaranteed irrigation, reliable, high-yield agriculture.
Rice, millet, dates. They supported huge populations, and critically, these ancient, highly developed bureaucracies that could manage it all.
They already had the blueprint.
Precisely. And they had these powerful governing texts, whether it's the absolute authority of the Quran or the state-sanctioned framework of Confucianism in China.
An entire operating system for society.
A comprehensive one, yeah. Moral, legal, administrative. Life, by comparison, was just. It was predictable. It was stable.
And that stability, according to the sources, is what proved fatal to disruptive innovation.
It was the enemy of necessity. I mean, if your current system, backed by a flawless philosophical text, is already working so well,
Why mess with it?
why would you risk social upheaval by chasing some disruptive new idea? You just wouldn't. Their intellectual energy went inward refining texts, writing commentaries, perfecting the aesthetics of governance.
So the system was so successful, it became self-sufficient. There was no need to develop an external disruptive system like modern science.
Right. The existing systems were enough, and that removed the pressure.
So there it is. The deep law. Stability equals stagnation. But that brings us right to the great exception.
Japan.
Japan. The ultimate outlier.
Based on geography, it should be just like China. It's got a mild climate, plenty of water, high rice productivity.
And this is key, an unbroken imperial dynasty. No breaks.
So if stability leads to stagnation, Japan should have been stuck. But it wasn't. It kept advancing intellectually and technologically long before the modern era.
So how did it combine that stability and progress?
Japan is what the sources call the third type. It's this rare hybrid. It managed to get the stability of the mainland model.
Without importing the stagnation.
Right. And the secret is all about how it structured its authority, how it filtered ideas.
Let's talk about that filtering.
Okay, so in China, Confucianism was the single absolute state operating system. The bureaucracy, the exams, everything ran on it.
It was total.
It was. But when Japan imported high Confucianism, like the really rigid Zushi school in the Edo period, it was adopted as a subsidiary OS.
Just one program among many.
Exactly. It had to coexist with native Shinto, with Buddhism, with all these local traditions. That prevented any one philosophy from getting total control. It left intellectual room to maneuver.
And that brings us to the core mechanism. The dual OS. In most civilizations, political power, cultural authority, religion, it's all merged. The emperor, the sultan, the church.
It's one single authority. But Japan separated them. And that separation is everything.
Okay, so on one side you have the court OS.
The emperor and the aristocracy in Kyoto. And after the Heian period, they had basically zero political or military power.
But they had the one thing the warriors desperately needed.
Legitimacy. Cultural and spiritual authority. The court was the source of myth, ritual, poetry, the kojiki, the imperial bloodline. It was designed to be eternal, unchanging. It was the stable foundation.
And then you have the system that actually, runs the country.
The warrior government. The shogunates, they handled the messy stuff, war, taxes, infrastructure, law enforcement.
The practical reality.
And that system was, by necessity, dynamic. It was competitive, it was fluid, it was constantly being updated to deal with immediate pressures.
So it's like having this sacred, unchanging constitution that provides the ultimate cultural meaning.
While the day-to-day government is like a hyper-efficient corporation that's constantly restructuring to meet market demands, the two don't overlap.
That's fascinating. But wait. If the court had no real power, couldn't a powerful shogun have just gotten rid of it, merged the systems like in China?
That's the essential question. They couldn't, because the court was the only source of the shogun's own authority.
I see.
If the shogun abolished the emperor, he'd just be another powerful warlord, and the next warlord in line could overthrow him. The court's political weakness was its cultural strength. It was untouchable.
So the unchanging culture legitimized the constantly changing politics.
Precisely. The structure eternal culture OS times a fluid political OS meant stability didn't become stagnation. The forces of stability and change were divided. They didn't compete on the same ground.
That separation is the safeguard. But we have to clarify something. It wasn't the warriors themselves who were the great innovators, was it?
No, that's a really important correction to make. The actual development, the breakthroughs in math, the complex commerce that came from the ecosystem.
Artisans, merchants, farmers, scholars.
They were the engine.
So what was the warriors' role in all this progress?
Their role was passive, but it was crucial. The warrior government, for the most part, did not interfere. They governed, they taxed, but they didn't try to monopolize or control intellectual production like their neighbors did.
Okay, let's contrast that. Talk about the suppressive mechanisms elsewhere.
Look at China again. The imperial bureaucracy tightly controlled everything. Why? Because the Confucian hierarchy valued the scholar official above all else.
Right, the merchant was seen as a threat.
Merchant wealth meant independent power. Independent thought was a threat to the ideology. The state would actively crush anything that threatened the established order.
And in the Islamic world.
There, especially after the 11th century, you often saw the religious authorities, the ulama, suppressing philosophy and natural science if they felt it conflicted with the Quran. They prioritized religious law over empirical inquiry.
But in Japan, that separation of powers let the ecosystem breathe.
Autonomy was everything. Political power didn't control knowledge. Religious power didn't control politics. So you had local economies flourishing, unique Japanese mathematics like Wasan developing independently.
The government just didn't get in the way.
They didn't drain the energy out of the society.
Okay, let's get to the aha moment from the sources. The element that kept this whole unique system moving forward. The psychological pressure from China.
This goes way back. Back to the Battle of Hakasukino in 663, Japan got absolutely crushed by Tang China and their allies.
And that defeat left a scar.
A deep one, a lasting fear of being swallowed by the mainland. That fear became this immense, constant external pressure to modernize, to catch up.
But the key factor here, and this is so brilliant, is the information filter. Japan didn't see the real China.
This is the essential insight. They didn't import the reality. They imported the ideal. They sent envoys who brought back only the treasure-grade stuff.
The classical texts, the perfect theories of government, the most refined art.
They filtered out all the messy reality, the corruption, the peasant revolts, the bureaucratic chaos.
It's like seeing only the magnificent treasures in the Shushin repository and assuming the entire country operates at that level of perfection.
Exactly. And the consequence was profound. Japan genuinely believed that this book, China, was the real China, a perfect civilization. This created this incredible self-imposed pressure. We must constantly catch up to this flawless ideal.
So Japan gets the best of both worlds. It uses the idealized version of China as a relentless benchmark to drive progress,
While simultaneously rejecting the rigid political system that was actually causing China's stagnation, they took the benefit and left the burden.
the ideal became the catalyst,
Their perpetual catalyst for evolution.
which makes what happens in the late 19th century so explosive, the Sino-Japanese War.
A civilization-level psychological shock. Japan, now modernized, faces the real China in battle and wins easily. But the shock wasn't the victory.
It was the realization.
The realization that the idol was not who they thought. Imagine chasing a perfect icon for over 1,000 years, only to find the reality is messy, disorganized, incompetent.
That collapse of reverence must have been profound.
And that deep, deep disappointment flipped, as it often does, into aggressive rejection, contempt. The sense of superiority wasn't just military, it was realizing they had actually surpassed the ideal they'd been chasing.
And what's amazing is that this pattern, importing an external idea, idealizing it, and then applying intense rigor to implement the idealized version, it didn't stop.
It's the core of the Japanese operating system. It's how they continue to evolve. Look at the modern convenience store.
7-Eleven.
Yeah. When that concept was imported from the U.S., the original American operation was rough. The manuals were a mess.
They didn't just copy that rough reality.
No. They looked at the abstract concept of convenience, the pure, idealized promise of it, and then they applied their unique rigor. Intense data analysis, sophisticated logistics, minute scheduling, a relentless pursuit of perfection.
And you get the modern Japanese convenience store, a hyper-sophisticated infrastructure that totally surpasses the original.
They took the ideal and made it real. Japan is a nation that takes external culture not as a reality to be copied, but as an ideal model to be rigorously, almost flawlessly materialized.
So to recap the core takeaway from this deep dive, Japan's exceptional ability to combine cultural stability with rapid innovation came from its unique dual OS structure, separating eternal culture from fluid politics, and its unique filtered relationship with external pressure, forcing it to chase an ideal, not a flawed reality.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought for you. If Japan's ability to evolve depends on constantly chasing an idealized external model, first China, then the West, what happens to its evolution when global power becomes less clear? Who or what will be the next ideal sample in a world where flawless ideals are so hard to find?
A question that demands some rigorous exploration. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.